The message arrived at 3:47 station time, buried inside a routine data packet flagged for compression errors. Kai Mercer almost deleted it. He was 2 cups of recycled coffee into a 12-hour shift at the Helix Station Intelligence Hub, a rotating drum of metal and secrets parked at the gravitational midpoint between Earth and the Dreth border, a place diplomats called a buffer zone and everyone else called a graveyard. He was 29 years old, lean in the way that people who forget to eat become lean, with dark eyes that had learned to move before his head did. 3 years of fieldwork had given him that. 3 years of the silent war had given him everything else. The compression error was a standard flag. 40, 50 of them crossed his desk on any given shift. He ran the decrypt subroutine out of habit, expecting corrupted sensor data or a misaligned timestamp. What he got instead was a single image file, 17 megabytes, encoded in a cipher that his console identified as Class 9 Sovereign, the classification layer used only by the Office of Stellar Security, the most sealed compartment within Earth's intelligence apparatus. Kai did not have clearance for Class 9 Sovereign. He stared at the flag for 11 seconds. Then he looked over his shoulder at the bullpen, 3 other analysts, all of them staring at their own screens, none of them watching him. He looked back at the file. His finger hovered. He opened it. The image resolved slowly, the decryption algorithm peeling back layers like skin from a wound. What emerged was a technical schematic. He recognized the basic architecture, a stellar impact weapon, the kind theorized in graduate-level astrophysics journals but never built, because the engineering requirements were considered impossible. A device that, if detonated at the correct solar proximity, could induce cascading fusion collapse in a G-type star. A device that could kill a sun. Earth Sun. At the bottom of the schematic, in Dreth script that his translation overlay rendered without mercy, were 2 lines of text. Project Sunfall. Deployment authorization, 96 hours. Kai closed the file. He sat perfectly still for a moment. Then he picked up his coffee cup, walked to the recycler at the end of the room, disposed of the cup, and walked back to his station as though nothing had happened. He was good at that. The silent war required it. He spent the next 4 minutes thinking with the part of his brain that had been trained to think under pressure, cold, sequential, ruthless. The file had come through a compromised packet relay, which meant either it was bait, a provocation designed to test his response, or it was a genuine leak from inside the Dreth command structure. The cipher was authentic. His console had confirmed it without being asked. Class 9 Sovereign did not generate false positives. The cipher architecture was too complex to spoof without resources that only a state actor possessed, and if the Dreth were running a false flag at that classification level, they already knew more about Earth's cryptographic infrastructure than Earth did, in which case the war was already over and none of this mattered. So, genuine. He thought about reporting it. The protocol was clear. Anomalous intercepts went to his section chief, Director Adora Voss, within 15 minutes of discovery. Voss would escalate to the OSS Directorate. The Directorate would escalate to the Security Council. The Security Council would escalate too. And there it was. The problem that made his hands go cold. The Security Council would treat a weapon capable of destroying Earth's sun not as an intelligence problem but as a military one. The treaty that governed the silent war, the Accord of Stillness, signed 2 centuries ago in the aftermath of a conflict that had nearly ended both civilizations before it began, contained a single ironclad clause. If either side developed a weapon of existential reach and deployed it, the accord dissolved. Automatically. Irrevocably. And the silent war became a real one. A real war between humanity and the Dreth Empire would not last long. Not because one side was stronger. They were, in the estimation of every analyst Kai had ever read, nearly perfectly matched, but because a war between 2 civilizations capable of building stellar weapons would end in mutual annihilation inside of 6 months. Billions of humans. Billions of Dreth. A quiet accounting of everything that had ever been thought or felt or made by either species, reduced to debris fields drifting through the dark. He could not report it. He sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling and thought about the second problem. He could not stop it alone. There was a bar on level 7 of Helix Station called the neutral particle. It was technically a recreational facility, which meant it was theoretically off-limits for classified discussions, which meant it was exactly where classified discussions happened because everyone understood that the surveillance architecture on level 7 had been quietly and mutually degraded by both sides' intelligence services years ago. The silent war had its own etiquette. You learned it or you didn't last. Kai arrived at 5:30, 43 minutes after opening the file. He chose a booth in the back, ordered water, and waited. He had sent one message, on a channel that was not logged by Helix Station systems because he had spent 6 months building a ghost relay specifically for this contingency, a contingency he had told himself he would never actually use. The message was 4 words. Sunrise. Level 7. No. The person he had sent it to might not come. Might have changed identity again, moved on, been recalled to Dreth space. Might be dead. Might show the message to her handlers and trigger the very escalation he was trying to prevent. He had run all of those possibilities in the 43 minutes since the file had opened, and he had sent the message anyway, because the alternative was watching the sun go out. She arrived at 5:47. He almost didn't recognize her. The Dreth were humanoid, close enough that early human explorers had needed a moment to register the differences, far enough that those differences had fueled 2 centuries of mutual distrust. Taller than the human average. Skin that ran from deep amber to pale ash. Eyes that had no visible pupil, just a single iris of shifting color that responded to emotional state the way a human blush did, involuntary, legible to anyone who knew how to read it. They had learned to cover those eyes in human-heavy spaces. She was wearing tinted lenses now, dark green, and her hair, the Dreth grew it long as a cultural marker of civilian status, and she had always kept hers long, a particular shade of near-black that caught light like polished carbon, was cut short. Practical. Anonymous. She was wearing a cargo tech's uniform. She was carrying a tool bag. She was very good. Her name, the name he had known her by, was Sevain. He did not know if it was her real name. In the 2 years they had spent running parallel operations out of Meridian Station, back when he was 26 and still believed that cleverness was a kind of armor, he had never asked. There were things you didn't ask in the Silent War. That was one of them. She sat down across from him without a greeting. Her lens-covered eyes found his face and stayed there. "You look terrible," she said. Her standard was perfect. It always had been. "I found something," he said. "Something I can't take to my people." "If you found something you can't take to your people," she said quietly, "you shouldn't be sitting here telling me about it." "I know. Kai." His name in her mouth had always sounded different than it did anywhere else, something in the resonance of her voice that the Dreth called underlength, a harmonic quality human vocal cords couldn't replicate. "Whatever you found, if it compromised you, if this is a test." "It's not a test." He pulled out his personal drive, a device that existed in a legal grey zone because it was technically his own property and technically not connected to Helix Station's network. "Project Sunfall. Tell me that means nothing to you." The color shift behind her lenses was subtle, but he had spent 2 years learning to read her. Her irises went from their resting amber to something colder, closer to grey. It was the color she turned when she was frightened. She was frightened. "Where did you get that?" she said. "Encrypted packet. Genuine Class 9 sovereign cipher, confirmed by my console. Schematic for a stellar collapse weapon and a deployment authorization." He kept his voice level. 96 hours from the timestamp, which was 43 minutes ago. Sevain was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the bar was beginning to fill with the early shift crowd, engineers, logistics officers, a few junior diplomats who used the space as a neutral meeting ground. The sounds of people who did not know. "I don't know about a deployment," she said finally. "I was aware of the theoretical program. I didn't know it had reached the authorization stage." "Are you telling me the truth?" Her irises shifted. Not to grey. To something warmer, a color he had once learned, painfully, to distrust because it was the color she turned when she was being most honest, and he had spent a year after Meridian Station telling himself that everything she had ever shown him in that color was performance. He was no longer sure. "Yes," she said. 95 hours and 56 minutes, he said. "I need to stop it without triggering the accord. That means no government channels, no military assets, no official anything. Just me. And I need someone who knows the Dreth command architecture well enough to help me find the weapon and..." "And what?" she said. "Destroy it. Disable it. Do you understand what you're asking?" "Yes. If this is real, if Sunfall is authorized, then there are people in the Dreth command structure who want it deployed. People with power. People who will not appreciate interference from a human intelligence officer and..." She stopped. "And a Dreth spy who went dark 8 months ago," he finished. A pause. "You knew." "I suspected. You stopped appearing in intercept traffic. Your cover identity dropped off every network simultaneously, which is too clean to be anything but a deliberate recall or a deliberate vanishing. I assumed the latter." "You assumed correctly." She looked down at the table. "I disagreed with an operation. I was told to execute it. I chose not to. I've been operating independently since then. What operation? She looked up. The grey was back. A political assassination. A human senator. The vote on the new trade accord, the one that would have opened 3 Dreth border systems to human commercial traffic. My handlers believed it would shift the economic balance dangerously. They wanted the vote to fail. He thought about Senator Aranavesh, who had died 8 months ago of what the official reports called a cardiac event and what the unofficial whisper network called deeply suspicious. He had read that file. He had suspected Dreth involvement. He had not been able to prove it. You didn't kill her, he said. No. But someone did. Yes. I was replaced on the operation. She said it without effect, which was worse than if she had said it with grief. I had 24 hours to disappear before my own people decided I was a liability. He sat with that for a moment. The weight of it. The specific quality of the silence that had lived between them since Meridian Station. The question he had never asked, the answer he had always half-formed and never confirmed. She had chosen not to kill a human politician. She had paid for that choice with her life as she knew it. He wanted to believe that was about ethics. He was afraid it was also about him. He could not afford either sentiment right now. Can you get us to the weapon? He asked. I can get us into the Dreth Command data network. If the schematic you found is current, the weapon will be on a platform, a dedicated installation, most likely mobile. I know the people who would have designed it. I know how they think about deployment logistics. She paused. I also know that the moment we start pulling data, we'll be visible. To your people. And yours. The OSS has penetration assets in Dreth Command networks. If we start moving, they'll see us. And they'll ask questions that you won't want to answer. He had already thought about this. He had thought about it in the 43 minutes between the file and the bar. How long do we have before the packet trace leads back to my console? Depends on who sent it. If it was a genuine leak, someone inside Dreth Command who wanted it found, they'll have covered the trace. If it was bait. It wasn't bait. How do you know? Because if it was bait, I'd already be in a detention room. He leaned forward. Someone wanted this found. Someone inside your command structure is trying to stop it and couldn't do it from the inside. They sent the most damning piece of evidence they had to the one place it might reach someone capable of acting on it. They chose Helix Station because it's the one location where both sides have unofficial channels. He paused. They chose a Class 9 sovereign cipher because they knew it would read as authentic. They knew whoever found it would have to act without official authorization. Sevain was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You're describing someone who knows exactly how both sides' intelligence services operate." Yes. That's a very short list of people. Yes. She looked at him steadily. It could be a trap designed to get us both killed. It could be. But you're going anyway. 95 hours and 40 minutes, he said. Yes. She stood up. She picked up her tool bag. She said, I have a ship. Private berth, level 2, registered to a logistics contractor that doesn't exist. Give me 40 minutes. He watched her go. He sat with his water and the enormity of what he was about to do and thought about the senator who had lived because of a choice Sevain had made, and thought about the sun hanging in the black 93 million miles from Earth, indifferent and necessary, and thought, 95 hours. Her ship was a converted freight hauler called the Unasked Question, which she had named herself and which he considered either poetic or ominous. It was cramped and fast and had been modified with a drive system that Kai was reasonably certain was illegal under 3 separate treaty frameworks. He didn't ask. The Silent War had its own etiquette. They cleared Helix Station's traffic control under a cargo manifest that Sevain had filed 4 days ago. She explained without being asked, kept several pre-filed departure windows active as a matter of habit. Preparation for flight was a permanent condition when you were operating outside your own government's protection. He filed that away. He filed a lot of things about her away, the way he always had, into a part of himself that he had tried to close off after Meridian Station and that kept opening anyway. Once they were in the drift lane and the station was behind them, he spread the schematic across the navigation table. Walk me through what I'm looking at, he said. She studied it. Her tinted lenses were gone, no need for them here, and her eyes moved through the data with a fluency that reminded him, not comfortably, that she was very good at her job. The housing architecture is consistent with Dreth Mobile Installation Design, specifically the 7th Fleet's Engineering Division. They specialize in weapons platforms that can be repositioned between jump points. She traced a line with one long finger. This component here, the induction array, it's designed to operate at close solar proximity, within the orbit of the innermost planet. Mercury, he said. Yes. The weapon would need to be placed inside Mercury's orbital path to achieve effective induction depth. She straightened. Which means it's already in your system, or it's en route. He felt the cold move through him. You're saying, if the authorization was issued before the packet was sent, and if they followed standard deployment protocol, the platform is already moving. She looked at him. We need to find where it is. Can you access the 7th Fleet's positioning data? I have credentials that are 8 months old. They may have been burned when I went dark. She moved to the ship's communications array. Or they may not have. It depends on whether anyone noticed I left, versus assumed I was eliminated in an unrelated incident. Would they have assumed that? It was a reasonable assumption at the time. She began working the console. I arranged for it to be reasonable. He watched her work. He had always found it difficult to watch her work because she became very still when she concentrated, a quality of absolute focus that he associated with precision instruments and natural predators, and there was a version of himself that he had spent 3 years trying to retire who found that extraordinarily compelling. There, she said. On the console, a network map bloomed. She had pulled it from a Dreth military relay. He could see the handshake protocols, using credentials that had not, apparently, been burned. The 7th Fleet's operational positioning data scrolled across the screen, encrypted but structured, and she began pulling threads from it with the confidence of someone who had spent years learning exactly where to pull. They don't know you're gone, he said. They know I'm gone. They don't know I'm alive. A small, cold smile. There's a difference. The data resolved. She pointed at a cluster of coordinates that made his stomach drop. There. A mobile installation platform, listed under a maintenance designation. It's in your solar system. Currently positioned, she checked the timestamp. At the outer edge of the asteroid belt. Moving inward. At that vector and velocity, he calculated, it reaches Mercury's orbit in 89 hours, she said. He had 95. He had burned 6 getting here. He had 89 left, which was exactly as long as they had. Can we intercept? At maximum drive capacity, we can reach the asteroid belt in 31 hours. She met his eyes. The platform will have a crew and defensive systems. We can't destroy it. We don't need to destroy it. We need to disable the induction array. Without it, the weapon can't achieve the solar proximity effect. It becomes a very expensive piece of non-functional engineering. That requires getting aboard. Yes. They will shoot us down before we get close enough. Not if we look like we're supposed to be there. He thought about this. He had been thinking about it since the bar. The platform is listed under a maintenance designation. Someone filed that designation deliberately, whoever sent us that packet. They created a cover story. He paused. We're the maintenance crew. Sevain looked at him for a long moment. Her irises had shifted to something he didn't have a name for, not quite the warm color, not quite the gray. Something in between. You understand, she said carefully, that the people on that platform believe in what they're doing. They believe it's necessary. They believe that ending the human solar system is a rational strategic action. I know. And they will kill us if they realize what we are. I know that too. And you're asking me to go back into my own military installation, a platform run by people who may know my face, my file, my history, to disable a weapon that my government authorized. He said nothing. You're asking me, she said, to commit treason. You already committed it when you refused the assassination order, he said. I'm asking you to commit it again for better reasons. She turned back to the console. She pulled up the navigation interface and began calculating the intercept course. The reasons are the same, she said quietly. They were always the same. He didn't ask what she meant. He wasn't ready for the answer. 31 hours at maximum drive was 31 hours in a space the size of a generous closet with a woman he had once trusted completely and then systematically distrusted and was now, by the logic of catastrophe, trusting again. He slept in 4-hour shifts. She slept less. In the waking hours between, they planned. She briefed him on Dreth military protocol with the thoroughness of someone who had spent her entire career building knowledge as survival equipment. Platform crew sizes for mobile installation units. Access codes for maintenance access points, out of date, but she knew the rotation logic and could extrapolate current codes with reasonable accuracy. Defensive firing protocols. The specific decision hierarchy of a 7th Fleet installation. Who could authorize a docking, who would question it, how long they had before a suspicious crew called for confirmation, and the whole fiction fell apart. He briefed her on the human side. What he knew about the OSS's penetration of Dreth command networks, information she received without expression, absorbing the knowledge of her own government's vulnerabilities with the same equanimity she brought to everything. What he knew about the Accord of Stillness and its automatic dissolution triggers, which she already knew better than he did. What he knew about the Senate Security Committee's standing protocols for existential-level threats, which he found fascinating in the way that people who have spent their lives in the machinery of power find other people's machinery fascinating. On the 19th hour, he asked her about Meridian Station. He hadn't planned to. It came out in the particular way that things you've been not saying for years eventually come out, sideways, without announcement, like a door opening into a room you've been pretending doesn't exist. The operation in the Meridian Corridor, he said. The one where you burned my informant network. She didn't pretend she didn't know what he was talking about. Yes. I lost 4 people. 2 of them were people I'd worked with for over a year. One of them was 22 years old. I know. I told myself you did it because you had to. That operational necessity. I did it because I had to, she said. And because I was told to, and at that point in my career, those 2 things felt like the same thing. She looked at the navigation console. They weren't. Were you told to get close to me, specifically? Was that? He stopped. Yes, she said. Initially. The word initially sat between them like a piece of wreckage. The relationship, she said, and he noticed she used the word plainly, without softening it, exceeded my operational mandate within approximately 4 months. My handlers were aware. They decided it was useful. I decided, she paused. I decided that decisions about what was and wasn't real were no longer ones I was going to let my handlers make for me. That's not an apology, he said. No, she agreed. It's an explanation. I don't think I'm entitled to offer you an apology and have it mean anything. He sat with that. It was, he thought, the most honest thing she had ever said to him, which was either reassuring or deeply troubling. The 22-year-old, she said quietly. His name was Pitek Aslan. I read his file. He had a sister on the Ganymede agricultural stations. He wanted to save enough to buy her a pressurized greenhouse. Kai looked at her. Her irises were the color that had no name. He had decided, on this long approach through the dark, that it was probably the color of grief. How many people have you read the files of, he asked, that your operations ended? All of them, she said. I read all of them. He didn't answer. He turned back to his planning screens. After a moment, she did the same. On the 29th hour, his console pinged. It was a message, routed through the ghost relay he had built, which meant it was either Sevain, who was sitting 3 feet away, or someone who knew about his ghost relay, which should have been impossible. He opened it. You found the package. Good. You have company coming. OSS field team departed Helix Station 6 hours ago. They were watching your console. A friend. He showed it to Sevain without a word. Someone is managing this, she said. The original packet, now this. Someone is shepherding us. The question is whether they're on our side. The question, she said, is whether they have a side that's the same as ours. He thought about that distinction. It was a good one. How far behind is the OSS team? If they left 6 hours ago and are using a standard field transport, they're 12 hours behind us. She calculated. They'll reach the platform approximately 4 hours after we do. 4 hours, he said. We need to be done in 4 hours. We need to be done in 4 hours without the platform crew killing us or the OSS team arresting us. Yes. She thought for a moment. The OSS team, they'll have orders to contain the situation. Which means they'll have orders to destroy the platform if they can't disable it. Destroying a Dreth military installation would trigger the Accord, he said. Yes. They looked at each other. Someone, he said slowly, is trying to make sure this situation escalates. The weapon. The leak that sent the OSS team. Someone wants the Accord to dissolve. On which side? She asked. Both, he said. This works if there's a faction in your government that wants a real war and a faction in mine that wants the same. The weapon is real. The leak to me was real. The leak to the OSS is real. But they're being used. We're all being used. Someone lit 3 fires, she said, and is standing back to watch them meet. We're one of the fires. He stared at the message. Our anonymous friend wants us to get there first. Wants us to disable the weapon before the OSS arrives. If we do that, if we succeed, there's no weapon, no trigger, no war. And we become the people who committed the unauthorized disabling of a Dreth military installation and the illegal interception of Dreth military intelligence. Yes. My people will want me for treason. Your people will want you for about 16 different violations of the Accord protocols. Yes. She looked at him steadily. And you still want to do this? 95 people died in the last 6 months that I can directly attribute to the silent war, he said. Intelligence officers. Diplomats. Informants. People caught between 2 governments fighting a war that neither side will admit exists. If a real war starts, that number becomes billions. He paused. I don't know how to choose anything other than the option that kills fewer people. Her irises had gone fully warm. The color he had spent 3 years calling performance. Neither do I, she said. She set the drive to maximum. The platform materialized out of the dark 4 hours later, a massive hexagonal structure, gunmetal gray, bristling with sensor arrays and the elegant, brutal geometry of weapon systems. It was larger than he had expected. It was always larger than expected when the expected thing was a weapon designed to kill a star. Sevain had been right about the maintenance cover. The code she extrapolated got them to docking distance without a challenge. The designation she filed, a routine induction array calibration check, the kind of maintenance that would have been scheduled regardless of operational status, bought them the first 10 minutes without alarm. They suited up in the airlock. She checked his suit seals with the same methodical efficiency she brought to everything. He checked hers. It was a strangely intimate act, hands on a stranger's life support, checking the integrity of the thing between her and vacuum, and neither of them acknowledged it. 3 things, she said, her voice coming through the helmet comm first. The induction array controls will be in the core section, below the primary crew deck. Second, there will be a security officer between us and the core. Third, I know his name. What? Commander Dreth Validation Oversight Officer Serek Than, she said. He was my training partner. He will recognize me. Which means we cannot allow him to raise an alarm. How do you want to handle it? She was quiet for a moment. I'll talk to him. Sevain. He knows me, she said. He knows me well enough to listen. That's more than any other approach gives us. The airlock cycled. They went in. The platform interior was exactly what the schematic had predicted. Narrow service corridors, utilitarian lighting, the specific organized efficiency of a military installation designed to function in absolute isolation. They moved through the maintenance corridors using the access code she had extrapolated, and they moved without speaking because the hull audio pickups were sensitive and because there was nothing left to say. They found Serek Than outside the core section, exactly where she had predicted. He was tall even by Dreth standards, and his eyes were currently the color of someone who has not slept well in several days. He saw Sevain and the color shifted, shock, then something more complex than shock. He reached for his sidearm. Don't, she said. In Dreth. Kai understood it because he had spent 3 years, for reasons he had never fully admitted to himself, learning the Dreth language from recordings. Sevain. Serek's voice was careful. You're supposed to be dead. I'm supposed to be many things. She took 1 step forward. I need you to listen to me. I have orders. If you're alive, you're a security threat. Protocol is. Serek. Her voice changed. Kai had heard her change her voice before. It was a skill, a tool, a practice modulation. This was different. This was someone speaking to another person through years of shared history. You know me. You've known me since we were 23 years old and scared in the same training facility. You know what I am. I know what you were. I don't know what you are now. I'm the person trying to stop something that will end everything, she said. The weapon. Project Sunfall. You know what it's designed to do. Serek's eyes shifted. The color Kai read as guilt. You have doubts, she said. I can see them. You've had them since you got on this platform. The Empire authorized. The Empire authorized an action that will kill 8 billion humans and trigger a war that will kill at least as many of us. Her voice was steady, almost gentle. Serek, you're not a person who does things like this. That's why they picked you, because your record is perfect, because you follow orders, because they needed someone reliable at the end of the chain. But reliable isn't the same as right. A long silence. Kai did not move. He realized, barely breathing. What do you need? Serek said. Access to the core. We disable the induction array. The weapon becomes inoperable without triggering any of the Accord's dissolution clauses. No deployment. No war. She paused. Then I turn myself into your custody, and you take credit for identifying and neutralizing the security breach. They'll know it wasn't me. Some of them will know. The ones who authorized Sunfall, the faction that built this platform, they'll know. But they'll be in no position to say so without admitting to the whole program. She looked at him steadily. And the rest of the Empire will see an officer who prevented an unauthorized escalation. A hero of restraint. Serek looked at Kai. And the human? Sevain glanced back. An acknowledgement. A question she was asking him with her eyes. The human goes home, Kai said. In Dreth. And forgets he was ever here. Serek's eyes shifted through 3 colors in rapid succession. Then he stepped aside. The induction array control system was a masterpiece of engineering and malevolence, a web of interconnected subsystems, each one dependent on the others, designed to make partial disabling impossible. The designers had been smart. They had anticipated sabotage and built-in cascade locks that would trigger an automatic deployment sequence if any primary component was disrupted. Sevain had anticipated the anticipation. She spent 42 minutes at the control interface, working through layers of system architecture with a focus so complete that she seemed to stop existing as a person and become a function. Kai watched the timer on his suit display. He watched the docking corridor for signs of the OSS team. He kept his breathing measured and his face still and felt the particular terror of a person who has handed the most important moment of their life to someone else and can do nothing but wait. She found it at the 42nd minute. A maintenance bypass, buried in a subsystem protocol 3 layers below the primary architecture, a protocol that existed because the designers had needed a way to test individual array components without triggering the cascade locks. A backdoor built for convenience and now repurposed for catastrophe prevention. She looked at him. Her eyes were the warm color. This will work, she said. But once I activate it, it will show up on the platform's maintenance log. Anyone who looks at the log will see a manual override was initiated. How long until they look? Crew shift change is in 2 hours. The OSS team arrives in 3. Yes. Do it, he said. She did it. The induction array went offline with a sound like a long exhalation. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just a system, ceasing. The weapon that could have killed a sun became, in the space of a single command sequence, a very complicated piece of dead technology. Somewhere in the platform's power grid, emergency lighting flickered on, then off. Project Sunfall was over. Kai stood in the core of a Dreth weapons platform 60 million miles from Earth and felt something he hadn't expected. Not relief, but a profound and specific grief for the world in which this had been necessary. For the 2 centuries of bleeding in private. For Pitek Aslan and his sister's greenhouse. For every person who had ever died in a war that everyone pretended wasn't happening. Sevain turned from the console. She looked at him. You should go, she said. Take the unasked question. You have the pilot codes. You can make the transit jump before the OSS team reaches docking range. And you? I'll stay. She said it simply, the way she said things she had already decided. Serek will take custody. It will look like what I told him it would look like. A security breach contained internally. No human involvement. Sevain. If you're here when the OSS team arrives, you become a diplomatic incident. They'll have to report you. Your government will know you were on a Dreth military platform. The questions won't stop. She paused. My government will have questions too, but they'll be questions I can manage. Or at least questions that don't start a war. He looked at her. He thought about all the things he had been not saying for 3 years, the room he had been pretending didn't exist. He thought about the choice she had made 8 months ago, and the one she was making now. He thought about the warm color of her eyes. I'm not doing this because of you, he said. I want that on record. I know, she said. Neither am I. But, He stopped. Kai. His name in her mouth, with the underlength he couldn't replicate. Go. He went. He was in the docking corridor when his comm pinged. A message on the ghost relay. Well done. Both of you. A friend. He stopped. He turned the message over in his mind. He thought about the original packet, the leak to the OSS, the careful management of every variable in this chain of events. He thought about who could have orchestrated this, who would have known about Sunfall, who would have known about his ghost relay, who would have known about Sevane. He thought about Director Adora Voss, who had recruited him, who had built the surveillance exceptions on Level 7 of Helix Station, who had an intelligence career spanning 30 years that touched both sides of the Accord in ways that most people in the OSS didn't know about because the ways that mattered were never written down. He thought about the 200-year-old architecture of the Silent War and the people who had spent their careers not fighting it but managing it, keeping it cold, keeping it quiet, keeping the Accord intact by threading impossible needles in the dark. He thought, someone has been doing this for a long time. Not just tonight. Someone has been doing this for a long time. He sent one message back, on the ghost relay, to the anonymous friend. Who are you? The response came in 11 seconds. Someone who has been at this longer than you have. Someone who will be at it after you're gone. The war doesn't end, Kai. It just changes shape. You changed its shape tonight. That matters. A friend. He stood in the docking corridor of a Dreth weapons platform and read those words 3 times. Then he deleted the exchange and continued to his ship. The unasked question cleared the platform sensor range 18 minutes before the OSS transport appeared on long-range scan. He watched them on the scope as he made for the jump point, a single vessel, standard field team configuration, exactly what his anonymous friend had described. They would arrive at the platform and find a disabled weapon and a Dreth officer in custody and a maintenance log showing an internally discovered security breach. They would make their reports. The reports would be classified. The incident would join the long, unacknowledged catalogue of the Silent War. He thought about Sevane, handing herself to Serek Than. He thought about the political architecture she had described, the cover story, the hero of restraint. He thought about whether she would be safe, and recognized that thinking about it was not the same as knowing, and that not knowing was a condition he had been living with for 3 years and would probably live with for longer. He thought about the faction that had built Sunfall and whether they would try again. He thought about Director Voss and the 30-year career and the ghost relay she had apparently known about and the long game that people who managed wars understood in ways that people who fought them didn't. At the jump point, he paused. He pulled up the navigation computer and input a course, not back to Helix Station. Not yet. First, a stop at a relay point 6 light hours from Earth, where he would spend 48 hours writing a report that he would never file through any official channel. He would record everything. The packet. The schematic. The platform coordinates. Sevane. The anonymous friend. Everything. And he would encrypt it, in a cipher he built himself, and store it somewhere that only he knew, and it would exist as a dead man's switch, a record that the Silent War had nearly ended the world and that it had been stopped by 2 people that neither side would ever acknowledge. Because the war didn't end. It changed shape. And someone had to know what shape it had taken. He engaged the jump drive. The stars streaked and folded. 7 weeks later, a diplomatic communique passed through the official channels between the Dreth Empire and the Human Senate. It was one of hundreds. It concerned a minor adjustment to the inspection protocols governing commercial traffic through the Dreth border corridor, exactly the kind of bureaucratic minutiae that the Silent War generated constantly, paperwork as camouflage, process as misdirection. Buried in the appendix, in a passage so technical that it required 4 layers of interpretation to extract any meaning, was a single new clause. It concerned the protocols for handling cases in which independent actors from either side discovered weapons programs in violation of the Accord of Stillness. The clause was deliberately vague. It did not mention any specific incident. It did not name any individuals. But it created, for the first time in 2 centuries, a formal mechanism. A back channel. A place where things that couldn't be said officially could be said anyway, by people who operated in the space between governments, in the silence where the real war was fought. Kai read the communique on a Tuesday morning, in the 3rd floor office on Helix Station where he had been temporarily reassigned, a lateral move, officially a commendation for unspecified analytical work, actually a very precise message from Director Voss that she knew what he had done and had decided that the correct response was to put him somewhere useful. He read the appendix clause twice. He thought about its authorship. He thought about the Dreth officer who might have been involved in drafting it, from inside a custody arrangement that may or may not have resolved in the ways Sevane had predicted. He thought about her saying the reasons are the same. They were always the same. He pulled up a new message window on his console. He opened the ghost relay, which still existed, which Voss had apparently decided not to dismantle. He typed an address that was a dead drop that shouldn't have worked, routing through channels that officially didn't exist. He typed, "I read the appendix." He waited 4 days. He had learned to be patient with things that mattered. On the 4th day, a message arrived. No identification. No preamble. "You were right about something. The reasons are enough." He read it once. He closed the window. He went back to work. Outside the station, the sun that humanity had nearly lost hung in the black, indifferent and vast and still there, still burning, still warming, still 8 minutes away at the speed of light. It did not know how close it had come. It did not need to. It was a star. It simply continued. Kai Mercer continued too. This story was brought to you by HSY Stories. Subscribe to our channel and be the first to experience every new story.